Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Knife Chats with Tobias. Figured I better start talking about this knife as soon as possible before Yakima Bob or Skip grabs this and throws it on Fun Knife Friday, because it's definitely a fun knife. Not your typical knife you'd find on Fun Knife Friday, but definitely a fun knife, especially if you're going out in the woods to do something. And this is the JG5, a knife designed by John Gibson of ESEE fame. And as you can tell by looking at it, it looks very similar to a Nessmuk. Notice the blade shape there. And that is because Gibson actually said he drew the inspiration from the Nessmuk knife. It's either ESEE JG5. What I got with it is obviously the standard leather sheath, and you've got a brown micarta handle going on with this. Now this is a knife that I was debating on buying for a very, very long time, but I just could not pull the trigger. And one of the main reasons I couldn't pull the trigger was because of the price tag. Well, Smoky Mountain Knife Works solved a little bit of that problem by dropping $25 off of this particular style. This is the one with the brown micarta handle, which was an exclusive of SMKW, the one being made out of brown micarta. But they knocked $25 off of the price, which put it at an acceptable price for me to pay for it. But I was still debating on why would I buy this knife. And the main reason I was debating is because, well, I'm not in the woods as much as I used to be. And when I go in the woods, I have several other knives that I could use instead. For instance, this is the Rough Rider 844, and this is a knife that I almost always take out in the woods with me because, well, it's just a simple, basic camp knife. It feels good in the hand, and I used it. I used it, and I could beat the snot out of it and not worry about breaking it or anything else. I know it's only 448 stainless steel, but it's all I really needed for the job. And I've got numerous knives that use steel similar to what's in here, because this is just 1095 carbon steel. I've got numerous knives made with 1095 that fill the same role as this knife does. And the other knife I almost always have when I'm out in the woods is right here. This is just my buck bait knife. Nothing fancy about it. Feels great in the hand. Works great. So, it's like, this is a knife that I really didn't need. And why am I going to spend, close to $100 for a knife I don't really need? And part of it is, well, it is an ESEE. It's a really cool looking knife. It looks very much like the old Nessmuk knives. I do have one other knife that looks like a Nessmuk knife, but it is a knife made in Pakistan, and the blade steel in that is pretty crappy, really. And well, let me show you that one real quick too. Okay, here's the other knife, and I paid about $15 for it. And I tell you what, the sheath is probably the best thing about this knife. So let's take a look at the knife. You see there, that is supposedly the Nessmuk blade. The blade is actually quite all wrong for a Nessmuk. It is more of a wide belly, what would you call it? An upswept wide belly skinner going on here. You do have the tip sort of dropping a little bit here, but it doesn't drop nearly the way an actual Nessmuk would drop. The handle actually has the finger grooves. It feels, actually the handle's probably the best thing about this thing. You see it's made in Pakistan, probably 420 steel. Blade is right at 4 1/4 inches long. But like I said, the sheath here was probably the best thing about it. The only thing I don't like about the sheath is the belt loop here. That was the first Nessmuk I bought. I like the sheath better than the knife, especially when it comes to the way the handle goes into the blade here. I would need to sand this down a whole lot more so that I could actually get my thumb to rest into that blade a little bit better. There's a very sharp edge here. Just don't like that. But it is well pinned, and you know, for a $15 knife with a genuine leather sheath with crocodile skin accent or buffalo skin accent down here, you know, well, you get what you pay for. And that's the case with the ESEE here too. You kind of get what you pay for, and there's a reason it costs what it costs, and I'm happy that I got it for a whole lot less than, you know, $25 off is a big deal. Let's just put it that way. So let's get going with the ESEE here. It came with a couple stickers. I think all the ESEE knives come with a sticker. You got the, I've seen this one before. This is the first one I have with the skull going on. Everyone on the ESEE groups are really raving about the skull, and the ESEE 5, I believe, used to have that skull on the blade, and a lot of people really like that. And they always come with the little survival card going on with it too. And got another thing down here that it came with, which is, you know, ESEE USA and everything. Now, ESEE knives are made in the United States, see right there, Randall Adventure Training and Equipment Group. You'll always see Rowan here. Rowan is actually the people who make it. Made in the USA, and this is the 5208, which is the JG5, ESEE JG5. By 5, they mean the length of the blade, and if we see right here, the blade is approximately 5 inches long. Cutting edge on the blade is about 4 3/4 inches long, because of how large the wide belly is on the Nessmuk blade. Now, if you notice here, what I was talking about was where the point of the knife is. If you see here, if we follow the handle going straight off of the back of the handle here and then going into the blade, the point drops below the curve, so it is lower than the handle. So it is a drop point blade going on with the Nessmuk. See the straight edge there along the bottom. So you have a drop point going along with the upswept going here, and that is really more of the way the traditional Nessmuk knife was. There was an actual point to it, but you also have it as kind of a wide belly. It's a really funky blade that Nessmuk came up with. It was you have the trailing point design. It's like a drop point trailing point knife. So you still have the point going on with it, but you have a wider belly going on with it too. And the main reason is because the knife was a general purpose knife used for skinning, as well as all sorts of other outdoor things that would be going on. The one thing the Nessmuk blade was not designed for was for batoning and such. Nessmuk was a person who carried 3 knives and a tomahawk or hatchet with him. This was the primary fixed blade, and then he had a 2 folders with him. One of them was his large folder, which was basically a large toothpick, probably about a 5 or 6 inch toothpick, and then a large moose basically was his other knife, his pocket knife. It was the moose knife had a spear blade and a clip blade on it. So those were the knives that he typically carried, and this was his the knife that everyone refers to as the Nessmuk knife. In any case, it's a pretty good resemblance of it, but John Gibson, no relation to me, did a few things to supposedly improve on the Nessmuk design. And the primary thing that he did was right here you have a spine that has that 90-degree cut on it, which is something that a lot of people rave about. And the purpose for that 90-degree spine is so that you can easily use a ferro rod to strike sparks. One of the complaints that people have had on this knife, however, is that it is a 1095 carbon steel blade. And you see a lot of eye rolls from the people at ESEE when people say, why aren't you using S30V? And why aren't you using this latest super steel and everything? And they kind of do an eye roll. And the same thing with, why don't you have larger blades? Why, a lot of newbies end up buying the SE6 and the Hungless and all this other stuff, the things with the bigger the blade, the better the knife kind of argument going on. But they say, well, and eventually what happens in the survival situation is you see people getting shorter and shorter blades, with the SE3 and the SE4 being very popular blades for people who end up going through their survival camps after they've completed them, because they see that that smaller blade is more logical than the super big blades that you see John Rambo using. And the same thing happens with the 1095. The reason 1095 carbon steel is so popular in the world of camp knives and survival knives is because it actually is kind of like the premier steel or the super steel, if you want to call it that, when it comes to a camp knife or a bushcraft knife. And that's because it takes a beating, it's tough, and it's easy to sharpen. So when you're out in the woods and you really don't have a way to resharpen your knife like the S30V, because you can't find anything heavy enough or sharp, you can't just go and grab a stone out of the stream and sharpen your S30V, whereas with 1095 you can actually do that. You can sharpen it much easier. So getting the blade back to a razor sharp edge in the woods is much easier with 1095 than with some of the newer modern super steels out there. And that's why the JG5 goes with 1095 carbon steel. I know a lot of people out there are arguing with me, shaking their head and everything else, but that's really what it comes down to. It's just a more practical steel for the survivalist. It's a more practical steel for your general camp duties and stuff. Not everyone out there needs a super steel in order to survive. And more than once I've heard the spokespersons from ESEE actually say that they roll their eyes and people say, why don't you make this an S30V? And they roll their eyes and say, okay, well, the customer wants it, we'll go ahead and make it for them. But they know in their heart of hearts that the better steel for actual use in the woods is a 1095 carbon steel. And that's why they stick with 1095 carbon steel in so many things. Same thing with when they, but people want that top quality stainless steel out there, so they make them for them, but it's not the best steel for all-around use in the woods. I guess that's the way to put it. Okay, rant over. Let's get back to the actual knife. As you see here, it comes in right at 10 inches long. About 9 3/4 inches overall. You saw the blade was right at 5 inches, and you've got a handle that is about 4 3/4 inches or so. You got a nice forward finger choil on the handle here, so the hand fits it really well. Now, if you notice, it's like got all these cuts in here, and I'm still not 100% sold on all the cuts here. Once I start using it a little more, I'll be able to tell you more about that or not. But it does provide a little bit of a grip, and you do have places where your fingers just kind of drop into. And because of that, it is kind of like holding on to a tire or something. You definitely have something to grip onto. So I'm assuming if it were wet or something like that, you might have a little bit more to hold on to with it. As for the spine of the knife up here, when you get your thumb out on the spine there, I don't find the 90-degree angle here that is there for the ferro rod comfortable when you start pushing your thumb into it. So I might actually take a file and round down a part of this spine here at the edge. Yes, this is a knife that I'm going to be using, so I won't feel bad about taking a file or a Dremel tool and grinding off part of this 90-degree spine. I don't think it needs to go all the way back there, at least not for me. If I need to use a ferro rod, which is not something I'm going to be doing a lot, I'll still have plenty of more spine up front to use that. Does it need jimping? No, it does not need jimping. Feels good this way too, so for the back cutting, and that's really where the 90-degree spine, rounding off a little bit of that spine might help a little bit. And I might also still round off a bit of the brown micarta right up at the top here and have it fit in there a little bit better. Something I'll do with a Dremel. I'll just get rid of, because this is a little bit of a sharp angle right there, right at the corner there. So that might be something that I will be working on smoothing. Down here it's not nearly as much of a problem. But like when I have the knife like this and I'm trying to cut back, that's where the hot spot happens. I feel better right here, but I tend to actually grab part of the blade when I'm cutting back this way. So that I definitely feel in my finger and I'm not too crazy about. So I will probably round down that piece of that. Now this is brown burlap micarta, and it actually looks pretty good on there. And if you notice, it is held on by a bunch of compression screws using a torque screw there. So that can be removed and you can clean it all up. The blade has a black oxide coating, which is really going to be good for hiding any kind of scratches or anything. And I like the black oxide coating better than the other thick coating that they put on there, like the enamel paint or whatever. This is good enough to hide scratches, good enough to protect the blade from rusting and everything like that. However, many people have said that it is not a food grade coating, so you really shouldn't use it for preparing food. You know, call that for what it's worth. If you want to, you can always remove the coating, and the black oxide coating is probably easier to remove than that heavier, almost like a paint that they put on there. I like the way the black micarta looks, and I also like the way the black micarta looks. I'm sorry, the brown burlap micarta looks. I also like the way it looks in the sheath. It kind of goes with it very well. Nice heavy sheath. You got your the fold over loop going there. You've got an extra piece going in there for the cutting edge, so your blade is actually hitting there, and it gives you a little bit of a gap going on in there. Nicely stitched all the way around, and as you can tell here, the sheath, like the knife, is made in the USA. Heavily stitched here also. So really well made sheath. You've got that little bump there. The little bump is actually there to actually help hold the knife in. The knife is in there quite a good distance, and it's not going to fall out, especially considering the sheath is something you'd be wearing with the handle facing upwards. So definitely a right-handed sheath, but any person who's left-handed would have no problem putting it on the other side and just pulling the knife out backwards, which we do all the time anyway. People in the left-handed world adapt to a right-handed sheath a whole lot faster than right-handed people can adapt to a left-handed sheath. Am I ranting a little bit there? I guess so, but in any case, the handle looks a little thin. And I guess a lot of people would say, man, that looks kind of thin. And when you compare it to this handle, it definitely looks a little thin. But I tell you what, when you have it in your hand and you grab it, it feels pretty good. It really does. The only thing is you have all those bumps in there and you're thinking, that kind of feels weird. The thing is it feels a little strange, but it does not create any true hot spots. Like I said, the only place that I actually feel any kind of hot spot is right up here, and you can see it. Very sharp point there, very sharp point there, and then the 90-degree spine. That is the only thing where I feel a hot spot. I don't feel it down here because of, well, the way the blade goes up this way. You know, you've got the guard there. So this part, I'm not going to run into as much. But what I might end up doing, I know I'm actually going to do, is I'm just going to remove the handle and I'm going to hit those corners with a Dremel, you know, and sand down those corners a little bit so they're not as pointy for me. And that is really all I need to do in order to get this knife out and use it. It's usable right now, but I'll do that so it'll feel a little more comfortable in my hand. And like I said, when I spend the amount of money that I spent on this knife, I did not spend it to throw it on the shelf. This is a knife that is now going to go into my use when I go camping or when I just go hiking in the woods or something. This is the knife that's going to be thrown into my bag because I can't wear it on my hip. If I go fishing, it's going to go fishing with me, so on and so forth. This will be a knife that ends up getting used. And even if it's just in the backwoods or I mean in the backyard around the fire pit, I'll use this knife for that purpose too. And just whittle wood or whatever. I think it'll be a really nice knife. Got a really good flat grind on the blade, which is typical of bushcraft knives. Bushcrafters really like that flat grind. The hollow grind is something you see more in a camp knife and everything, but this will work fine as a camp knife too. It's kind of like a best of the both world, worst of the both world knives, in that you've got the flat grind, which is really good for bushcrafting, but a flat grind is going to be good for skinning as well. 90-degree spine, really good for bushcrafting. It's not going to take away from like a skinner. You can still have a 90-degree spine on a skinner also. So really just a great knife for, you know, camp lore or whatever you want to call it. Made in USA, and I'm pretty happy with it. So there's my thoughts on the JG5. I'm not a big bushcrafter, but I do like to go camping, and I do like to just go walk in the woods. And this is definitely more knife than you need for a simple walk in the woods, but definitely also a knife that if you're looking for something for survival, this one would hold up pretty well for it, I think. Any case, there you go. I'll take a few pictures, some slides, and give the specs, and call it a day. thank you once again for dropping by and spending a few minutes here at Knife Chats with the Pius. I really do appreciate it, and I do appreciate any comments that you leave. So please remember to give me that thumbs up, and also don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the next episode is up and running. Thanks again for dropping by. Really do appreciate your time here.